Metal Jesus here. Now, about a year ago, I gave my very first tour of my man cave / game room. And, it was a huge success. I got a bunch of people watching that, a bunch of people commenting, but I also got a ton of questions. And some of the things that people were asking me is like, how specifically is it actually configured? What kind of speakers do you use? How do you protect the consoles whenever they're not in use? Things like that. So I thought, now's a great time to kind of give an updated game room tour and show you some of the new stuff I got. And I think you're going to like it. Let's take a look. All right, so I'm going to give you a tour of my game room, which is down in my basement. My basement's about 900 square feet, and we recently finished it. And my game room takes up about a quarter of that. And I have a really nice futon down here, and I got 2 IKEA entertainment centers that hold the majority of my stuff. But I should note, this is not all of my consoles, actually. Upstairs in my living room, I have the current generation stuff, like the Xbox 360 and the PS3, all connected to my HD TV. But I'm not going to focus on that. I want to keep it down in the game room. Now, a question I occasionally get is, how do you keep the consoles looking so nice? The solution I came up with is not exactly elegant, but it works for me, and that's basically a combination of plastic bins that I've put a notch in, or if it works better, I'll actually use a cloth napkin. And again, all these things are really cheap from Target, and I think that they work pretty well. And essentially, I don't have to keep dusting these things off, and I really only uncover what I'm going to be currently playing, since all of these things are always connected to my system, so I don't want to have to pull them out of boxes and things like that. So this solution works pretty well for me, actually. So here's some of my older consoles. I just picked up the ColecoVision about a couple weeks ago. Here's the Atari 7800. I use that because it also plays 2600 games. Like it a lot. This is the NES, the Super Nintendo, and of course, the mighty Sega Genesis that I got from my good friend Josh. Thank you, Josh. And here's my little switcher that I use. All right, now starting on the left here is the Nintendo Gamecube. This is a really cool console, and also attached to the bottom of it, this is an optional Game Boy player. You can play Game Boy Color, and also Game Boy Advance titles on it. And what's cool about it is that you can play those old games, and which would typically be handhelds, on a big screen. And that's a pretty nice little feature. Here's the Sega Dreamcast. This was given to me by a friend, and I love this console. Next up is the Sony PlayStation 2. This is the slim model here, and this is one of my all-time favorite consoles. Love it a lot. The original Xbox. This is the Halo edition. And this is modded so that I can copy games to the hard drive, which is very handy. That way I don't have to keep pulling games out. The original NES, and also a classic, although I need to replace the 72 pin on there because it sometimes doesn't work. It's kind of a bummer, but a classic console. And then, of course, the Nintendo 64, another recent addition to my collection. So one of my main goals with all this was to be able to walk downstairs at any moment, push a couple buttons, and play any of these consoles at the drop of a hat. And the way I did that was basically a combination of 2 switchers here. This is the main one. This takes 6 inputs and outputs those to the television. But there's a couple consoles that don't quite work with that, and that is the Atari 7800 and the ColecoVision, which you see here. Those are being sent to this little switch here that goes into the back of the television directly. And then some of my older consoles right here are on a special switch that sends it to one of the inputs on the bigger switch. So I know that sounds kind of complicated, but actually it works really well. Now, the way I capture the footage for my reviews is I have a splitter on the output. So before I send it to the television, I send part of the signal to this little device, which is a USB cable that plugs directly into my Mac, and it works flawlessly. So all of the audio is being sent to this Mackie mixing board here. And this is a little bit overkill, but I had this left over from when I used to have a recording studio. And it's nice having the flexibility here. So for instance, I also have the ability to just walk down here and plug in an iPod, if I wanted to sort of sit around. And also my turntable's connected to it. And all of those are pumped out to the KRK V6 powered studio monitors. These are really nice monitors, and the whole goal of these is to not color the audio signal at all, so it tries to really sort of reproduce the actual audio, and they sound fantastic. Now, a new addition to my game room I just want to show off real quick is a classic turntable. I have a bunch of vinyl, and it's really fun to be able to go down here, sit on the futon, and just chill out reading a book and listening to some actual vinyl. This is so awesome. This was a gift on my birthday, actually. So I just kind of wanted to show this and some of my albums here. Here's a cool little thing I have, which is basically a remote to turn off the power strip. It's nice whenever you have really old consoles that you don't need turned on all the time. And of course, the final piece to any game room is the television. And the great thing about televisions right now is that everyone's switching to HD TVs, and they're practically giving these things away. So I got this 32-inch flat screen television. Now it's the old tube type, but it's at least a flat screen for $50, and it has all the inputs that I needed. It's such a great deal. One of my goals of the game room was to try to keep everything neat and tidy. I knew I was going to have a lot of games, and I didn't want them all just lying around. And so one of the solutions I came up with was getting these two IKEA entertainment centers, and then basically going to Target and getting some really small little cheap shelves like this. And game cartridges fit really well in them. Keep them perfect, and you never have to buy them again. It's really nice. These are my Nintendo 64 cartridges. Over here I have my PSP and my DS. Here's my DS here, which doesn't get enough love, sadly. Here are my Super Nintendo cartridges. I just kind of started collecting the Super Nintendo for the first time, I think last year. So it's not a bad little collection. But my intent is to try to get all of the best games for that system. Now, on this side of the entertainment center, you're getting a little bit of a mishmash of different consoles stuffed in here. There are some ColecoVision cartridges in there, and some Atari 5200 games right there. And those never get enough love. Here is the Atari 7800, some more 5200 games. I just got a ton of 5200 games from this one guy, and sadly, it just never gets that much love. That console kind of blows. The joystick's a piece of crap, but I've got a lot of games for it. Now I thought I'd show you around on the walls a little bit, show you some of the art I have. This was I believe this is a promo poster that Sony sent me about the PSP. Very neat. Here's some very old school comic books. Love me some Star Wars and Battlestar Galactica, the original. Very cool. Here's some original Star Wars posters that I had framed. Again, I'm such a nerd, but I absolutely love Star Wars. And then, what game room would not be complete without Kiss Ducks? Yeah, Kiss Ducks. Now, here's one of the rarest things I have, which is an Ico cage that Sony sent me in a press kit. And I got some random art that I framed, and also some figures, because every nerd needs figures. I'm sorry, it's true. Now, in this part of the entertainment center, I have the original Sony PlayStation 1. This is the model that a lot of audiophiles look for because of, I guess, the CD tracking or something. And then here is the lonely and sad Atari 5200. Wah, wah, wah. In this part of the game room, I have some just random boxes, a lot of old PC games. There's an original Atari 2600 box. And then down there's my ColecoVision, which I just got, and the Sega Genesis. And then now we've moved on to my GameCube collection, and just highlighting some of my favorites here, like Eternal Darkness. Love that game. Also, Fire Emblems is a great turn-based strategy game. Shooters are always good. Love those. Killer 7, weird, wacky game. I really like the GameCube, and I just love some of its more unique titles. It's definitely underrated, in my opinion. But I enjoy collecting for it, for sure. Now, here is my Dreamcast collection. And I don't have a lot of... I have, a decent amount of Dreamcast games, but I certainly would like to buy some more. I got some of the bigger titles, but again, the Dreamcast is weird. It's hard to find games on Craigslist, and when they're on eBay, sometimes they're just a little bit too expensive for my blood. But it's definitely a great console, and it's got some great racing games on it, so I have a bunch of those, but always looking to add some more. Original Xbox collection is actually one of my largest, and I really like the original Xbox. It's a nice console. I like the fact that you can mod it, and you can copy a lot of these to the hard drive, so you don't have to keep digging them out. It's easy to play them. And a lot of third-party games for it were some of the best. So I'm showing you some of my my favorite ones here. A couple duplicates. Occasionally I'll get an entire collection, and sometimes, you know, there'll be duplicates in there. So that's okay. I don't mind duplicates. And Tron. This is part of my Xbox 360 collection. These games I'm done playing, but I have some more upstairs I'm still working on. Here's my Atari 2600 collection. Not the best condition, but there's definitely some fun titles in here. And I just added a couple more last week. And I don't know what it is about the Atari, but man, I love collecting for it. Now here's a little box that I actually keep my favorite Atari 2600 games in there. And some great games in here. Now this one's probably maybe one of the rarest games I own, which is Time Pilot. Not a great game, but it's in there. And of course we have Hero though, which is my favorite game for the Atari. Love that game. And a bunch of classics in here. My PlayStation 3 collection's kind of small. I've actually added a couple more games since I filmed this, but here you can see some of the ones I own. So down here in these bins, I have most of my Sega Genesis loose carts, some classic games. These containers are nice for cartridges because they keep them dust-free, and you can pack a ton of them in there. Now over here is where I keep some of my Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games. Again, it's nice to just stuff them in a drawer. Back when I was reviewing games full-time, Sony sent me every single PSP game made, and for years. So it was awesome. I used to have just a massive PSP collection. But over time, I scaled that back, and these are just my favorites here. And, you know, that's okay. I still love the PSP. I think it's a great handheld. Definitely one of my favorites. Here you're seeing a few of the box games I own, 5200 games, Atari 2600 games, Spider-Man and Montezuma's Revenge. And then you also see some of my DS games there, although those are pretty sad. I probably should try to get some more, but I don't play the DS as much as I used to. Here's some random PC games, and I'm going to show you more PC games here in a bit. Here are some random NES games. Always good to have in a collection. The PlayStation 1 is one of my favorite consoles to collect for, and here is some of those games. I got all the Final Fantasies. I got pretty much most of the RPGs from that era, and so it's a good little collection. These are boxed Sega Genesis games with one lone N64 game at the end there. I really like the Sega Genesis and its case. I mean, it's nice that they're so easy to keep this way. And then finally, for my consoles, I have the mighty PlayStation 2. Here's a bunch of games for that. Really love the PlayStation 2. Tons of great games for it, for every genre. And some of my all-time favorite games came out on that, including SSX3. I have to just do a shout out there because I love that game. All right, well, next up, I want to show some of the old PC games that I've kept over the years. Now, I used to try to keep all these games in the boxes. I mean, for years and years and years, I had all of my PC games in boxes. And the thing is about that is that those boxes are huge. And when I was moving, I would just have, it seemed like half of the boxes that I was moving were old box PC games. And, you know, after 15 years of doing that, you have to call it quits. And so a lot of those games I pulled out of the boxes and put into these binders here. And, you know, part of me regrets that a little bit. I probably should have kept more of the more rare ones, but in the same token, it's the games that are important, and, you know, I still have all of these here. These are all originals. So, and it's cool to kind of, you know, dig in here and flip through a couple pages and randomly pick out a game and throw it in and play. It's a fun collection to have. Now, if it seems that there's an unusually high number of Sierra games here, well, if you know me, you know that I used to work at Sierra. And Sierra had this policy where no matter if you bought the game at retail, if you had a problem with it, you could return it to them for a refund. And so we would get refunds on Sierra games all the time. Basically, massive boxes would come in from shipping and people would just go nuts. You just take any and all games that you wanted. Now, the really cool part about that is that you could do trades with other video game companies. So, for instance, we would get lots and lots of Sierra games unopened for free, basically. And then we would call up or email Activision, Sony, Microsoft, whoever, and say, hey, we've got a bunch of copies of King's Quest 7 or Leisure Suit Larry or whatever you want, Half-Life, whatever we were publishing at the time. And then they would send us their games. And it was an awesome system. That's where I got a lot of these from, is basically just doing trades while working at Sierra. And so, I've got some kind of weird and obscure stuff in here too, which I think a lot of people have forgotten, but also some classics. And, it's just, again, it's neat to have a lot of these old PC games. You don't find them, out as much anymore. If you go into pawn shops and stuff, they're either in terrible condition or it's hard to find them. I mean, eBay, I think, is the only place that I'm aware of. All right, and then finally I want to basically highlight another part of my collection, which is the game that I was in, which was called Shivers 2. While I was working at Sierra, they were looking for a guy who had long hair and was kind of a rocker. That's me, and I played guitar, and basically it was a game about this band, and I'm showing you the strategy guide here. I'm actually in one of the pictures in the background. And we basically went out to Eastern Washington and shot footage for a day. And then we also went to Issaquah and shot footage for a day. And it's kind of this weird sort of game. It wasn't really popular, but it's got a little bit of a following. It's very similar to Myst. And so I just want to show that part of my collection. It's kind of funny and it's kind of cool. All right, well, that's my game room, and that's part of my man cave down here in my basement. And there's also a music section where every week we basically play music, and there's an entire band set up there. So if you're interested in checking that out, watch the video I made last year, and it's very cool if you're a musician. If you're interested in seeing my entire collection, I posted online. There's a link below down there, and check it out. And again, love to hear your comments and questions. Thanks for watching.